I've been exploring the oceans for as long as I can remember. At the age of 4, I sailed around the world with my parents, and I guess the experience must have stuck. At 15, I joined the Royal Australian Navy and trained as a diver. I've been wandering the world ever since. When we first started diving in the Navy, we did a dip in a hard hat, you know, just to let us know how nasty it used to be. Diving with lead boots on and a big heavy head. Just before they'd screw in his faceplate. If you had a beard, one of the things that they used to do is either reach inside and pull his beard out till his chin ended up like that, and then screw the faceplate in. And he'd have to spend the rest of the dive then just underwater, you know, unable to touch anything. That was when divers were rough, tough and nasty. This journey has been brewing inside of me for some time. A voyage across the Moluccan Sea into some of the most remote islands on Earth. It's a rare chance to sail and dive with the people of the islands, whose lives, like mine, are bound to the ocean. Scattered across the seabed of this vast Indonesian archipelago lie 1,000 years of untold stories. From the first explorers to the savage battles of the Second World War. That's what we're looking for, and the islanders are the key to finding them. The Indonesians call their country the land and the sea, 17,000 islands peppered along 4,000 miles of the equator. Our journey picks up on the northern tip of Sulawesi at the port of Manado. The plan is to island hop north through the Sangihe Islands and then sail east across the Moluccan Sea for Morotai and Halmahera. It was here, during World War II, in this lonely stretch of the South Pacific, that the Allies went toe-to-toe with the Japanese fleet. It didn't take long for us to get our first lead on what might be an undiscovered wreck. While the ship was being readied in Manado port, we heard a story about 4 seaplanes resting at the bottom of a lake, 2,000 feet up in the highlands. The planes were Royal Dutch Air Force Dornier 24s, and their base was the western shore of the lake.
This is a big plane.
Big plane.
They were moored 50 meters out from this concrete jetty. In early 1942, the planes were sunk by Japanese aircraft. Diving at an altitude of 2,000 feet in fresh water is very different from diving in the ocean. When we get out, I'll stop at 75 meters. I'll do a tug on the line. According to the story we heard, the seaplanes were carrying a full load of arms and ammunition when they were attacked. The older explosives become, the less predictable they are, especially if they've been submerged for over half a century. Exploring military wreck sites, the initial procedures are locate, identify, but do not disturb. Using a fixed line of 75 meters, we start with a simple circular search from the jetty. Our masks are equipped with microphones so we can communicate underwater.
Okay, I'm moving on a bearing of 070. The depth here is 4 meters.
The visibility reminds me of my time diving in the mouth of the Saigon River in the 60s, searching for mines strung together and floated downriver by the Viet Cong. It was dangerous work and you couldn't see an arm's length in front of your face. Grab the wrong thing and you'd be blown out of the water.
The bottom is silt. I reckon the planes could sink into this.
Throughout the day we searched an area of 2,000 square meters. Nothing. I mean, we can continue looking
We've still got air, so we can do maybe a pattern search of some sort, maybe go further out, but I suspect that they're probably not there. Yeah. However, we shall not give up hope.
Back in Manado Harbour, our ship is almost ready. I've just enough time before we sail to walk around and take it in. There is nothing like the chaos of an Asian port. I can't help wondering about each vessel, where they're heading, where they're from, what they're carrying. Ferry boats from the outer islands, ships full of spices, timber, fishing boats, you name it. Man with a load of spices, man with a load of spices. Don't get in the way of a man with a load of spices. The people are a fantastic mix. Melanesians, Malays and Chinese. There are Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists. It is a scene that hasn't changed since the first galleons, junks and schooners came to trade on their way back and forth to the Spice Islands. Like them, we're here to take on essential supplies, food and fuel, and as much fresh water as we can carry. Our boat, the Bianca, is called a pinnace. Vessels like this are the workhorses of the islands and have been for a couple of 100 years. It's a no-nonsense wooden ship with a broad beam and shallow draft, built for coastal navigation. A vessel like this is very romantic to look at, but it only has a shallow draft. It's like an Arab dhow in a lot of ways. You get any sort of a swell or wind and it's going to rock. But it's a big boat. It shouldn't be too bad. But you know, when you're in shallow water, in an hour or so, the wind can blow up a chop, which will, you know, it can be, people who haven't experienced it, it's alarming how quickly sticky weather can come up. The first mate, Agus, is from the nearby Sangihe Islands, and he knows these waters well. A day's sail to the north, we approach Nain Island.
Ada banyak kapal di sini.
Kapal hanya kapal-kapal nelayan, perahu-perahu nelayan, perahu tradisional begitu.
Oh yeah. Pieces of polystyrene out there. That's a big seaweed farm. Everywhere out there. It looks like the whole of the reef flat has been covered with a seaweed farm.
The people here are called the Bajau. Their ancestors were sea gypsies who lived on the sea, fishermen and divers.
And actually the village over there, they're either on the water's edge, right on stilts, or they're built out from the shoreline and on stilts as well. Okay, it looks like a mosque.
As we approached, a seaweed farmer comes alongside. Udin told me his seaweed goes to Japan and Italy for ice cream and cosmetics. He seems to do all right out of it too, about $5 a kilo. The reef flat is divided into family plots. The seaweed sprigs are attached to long lines suspended beneath the surface with upturned plastic bottles. An ingenious system of aquaculture. Udin keeps a close eye on the crop, picking up loose strands that have settled onto the coral below. I particularly like his goggles, handmade out of scraps of wood and glass.
Ini besar, kepala besar, big head. A fashion statement. I think it's the latest. Can you get them tinted?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
After a short dive on Udin's farm, we carefully make our way through the shallows up to the island. Along the shoreline is a huge wooden platform where the farmers dry their seaweed. Yes, rather frail frame by the look of things here. We have to be careful about where we walk. Main Street, Nain Island. No cars here, but boy, are there a lot of people. The local mosque is having a fundraiser. It's time for a dance, but it will cost me. I have to pay 50% in advance.
Me? You? Okay. I'm not sure whether she wants to lead or she wants me to lead. Is it the money or me?
Yeah.
Me?
No.
Okay. That was quick. Okay. Nanti. Ah, yeah.
Close to the island, two young boys on a raft are keeping watch over a fish pen. Oh yeah, right in the bottom. These beautiful clownfish have been caught on the local reefs. They're about 3 meters down. That's a bit sad. They're way out of their environment. This is not where they should be. I guess just standing by, waiting to be sold to some guy to put in his fish tank. It's a bit sad. As we return to our boat, we come across a group of divers working from a small dugout. They are fishing on the reef using simple spear guns. This is how they survive, catching enough to eat and selling what is left over.
These guys are great. There's one bloke down there, I don't know how he holds his breath, really. I could go up and down 3 times and he's still cruising along the bottom. It's fabulous. This guy just here, he's great. He can hold his breath longer than anybody I've come across. And the thing about these blokes is, okay, they've got a spear gun. There's no rubber attached to it. They don't just pull on a piece of string and go to the surface. If they miss the fish, they've got to go after their spear. They go to the surface, there's every chance that they could lose it. See here, the little marks above its eye? It's on the spear. They come up. they bite the head like that.
Captain Cook sailed near here in 1771, and he pondered the noble savages of the South Seas. In reality, he wrote, they are far happier than we Europeans. The earth and sea furnishes them with all things necessary for life. He had a point. By late afternoon, the weather began to change. A storm is moving in from the west. We head into deeper water and sail for the nearest safe harbour. In the early hours, the storm hits us with full force. We barely make it into the harbour, but our anchor doesn't hold and we are drifting aimlessly. The waves are pushing us dangerously close to the rock jetty. Behind us, other boats are crowding into the harbour. We're about to hole the ship. Desperate, the crew jump into the water, taking the lines with them, and swim ashore in the rough sea. They don't have much time. An island ferry boat is backing in and about to crash into us. Somehow, in the driving wind and rain, they managed to secure our vessel to the shore. The crisis over, triumphant and exhausted, they returned to the boat. By first light, the storm has passed, and we continue our journey through the Sangihes to Siao, one of the oldest of the Spice Islands.
Right ahead of us, heading 350 at the moment. Up ahead there we've got Ulu, which is just here on the eastern side, inside the bay of Pulau Siao. Beautiful shape, lovely classic volcano shape.
Before us, rising 7,000 feet out of the sea, Mount Karangatang, Siao Island.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Actually, no, it's got to be clouds, but that looks like smoke coming away from the peak. Look, there's a new lava flow coming down the right-hand side there that's just cut straight through the forest. That must be very recent.
Dan bagi calon penumpang kapal Kermano 2 yang masih berada di atas dermaga atau di seputaran pelabuhan, supaya Anda segera naik ke atas kapal. Karena tinggal saat lagi kapal Kermano 2.
What we're heading for down here on the waterline is what I understand is a navigation mark that was left here with the Dutch East India Company. What I've been led to believe, it's one of the two lead markers that would guide ships into the harbour here. Right. Oh, there's definitely a carving on here. Is this the Dutch East India Company here marking we've got here? Can you see down here?
This is indeed the crest of the Dutch East India Company, VOC, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie.
And ordinarily it would be twinned with another one that would be further up the hill and back, so that when you're entering harbour, the two of them would line up like that, and when they're in a straight line, you know you're on a straight, safe path. And in fact, from here, looking straight out between the islands, you can see a gap between the islands. Although I must say that it looks a little small to be seen from back there. Of course, they still had binoculars, or telescopes rather, in those days, so they could very easily have seen it. Still, it's a reminder of the past of this particular little part of the world when the Dutch were here trading for their nutmeg and mace.
In 1974, violent earthquakes shook the island. The islanders, all 40,000 of them, expecting a massive eruption, left in a hurry.
So, Main Street, Poso, Saturday morning. Bit of a tricky one, this. I think I figured out why everybody's on this side of the road. It's all in the shade. Sun comes up over there. You get the sun on that side of the road. So all the nutmeg, the reason this place exists, is on that side of the road over there. This side of the road is where the traffic jam is. And we can't get anywhere. I think as the sun comes up, we end up having less and less space to move in. I guess the crowds eventually disappear around midday. Fantastic. Love it. Oh, these are all the little warehouses that have existed with all the nutmeg drying on the side of the road here.
This is what it was all about, nutmeg. Across the Spice Islands, this scene is as old as history. Saturday morning, the local ladies bringing sacks of nutmeg from their mountain gardens into town to a Chinese wholesaler. His family have been spice merchants here for a long time. Raul Tombolong is an enviably fit 80 years. He reckons some of his nutmeg trees are 500 years old, planted by the Portuguese.
Oh!
Hati-hati.
Ini berarti sudah tua bagus. Iya, ini yang bagus. Ini yang bagus, kualitas bagus.
The inner nut is the nutmeg. He gets about $8 a kilo. The bright red flesh is the mace. He gets about $20 a kilo for that. Not bad.
Kulitnya ini kalau 1.200 biji 1 kilogram dia punya berat.
Smells good too.
Sampai di sana buat apa ini?
Nutmeg was once worth more than its weight in gold. What an earthly paradise that must have been, waiting for gold to drop from the trees. Raul told me stories from 1942 when Japanese soldiers arrived on the island. They came ashore wearing nothing but loincloths. The islanders were terrified and hid up in the mountains. Later, in 1944, an American aircraft flew reconnaissance missions over the island. The Japanese concealed a patrol boat beneath a big tree down in the harbour, but the boat was sighted, and in a matter of days an American bomber returned, attacking and sinking the vessel. Raul led me down to the waterfront. Here, beneath the ferry boats, was the wreck of a Japanese Navy patrol boat. It's there all right, he said. Right there, out in the water. Right there. You'll find it, it's right there. He was quite specific. How easy could that be? Right under our noses. We get our gear and get straight in the water.
Moving forward, parallel to the shore at 5 meters depth. Okay, this is a big piece of metal. This could the engine plate.
It turned out to be a big piece of junk. But we did find something.
Yeah, oh, look, there's a hole here. There's a freshwater spring, I think. Oh, Lord, the temperature just dropped about 10 degrees. Yeah, oh, this is the thermite pipe. See the shimmering effect in the water where the cold water meets the wall?
There was nothing that even came close to what would resemble a wreck. So I figure that the old man nailed it yesterday, and he said that it blew up and probably all the wood floated away and floated to the surface, which would have left the only heavy metal part, which was an engine, in place there. And I think with the movement of the sand, it's probably either covered up or it's underneath the rocks there. So another little disappointment, but hey, we're getting closer to getting ourselves a wreck, and that's what's important. It just goes to show how difficult it is to find them, even when you've got people, eyewitnesses, to tell you exactly where the thing went down. It shows how difficult it is to actually find a wreck that people aren't stumbling on all the time.
As we head out into the open sea, we spot 3 small fishing boats. They look like they're in trouble.
These guys want benzene, I think. They want fuel.
These are no ordinary fishermen. On the vessels are 2 air compressors. These are hooker divers. We sort them out with fuel, and they invite us to dive. They are called hooker divers because of the long air hoses they breathe through, like smoking from a hookah pipe. As the young men drop down, the women on the surface feed them their air hoses. They are wearing belts made out of fishing weights. I'd heard stories of hooker divers crippled and killed by the bends. No one had told them about decompression sickness, about the effects of staying down too long and too deep. These young men have neither watches nor depth gauges. The flashing white string, like bunting, is to scare the fish before them, driving the schools into the waiting nets.
That looks nice over there. It's time when everything starts to calm down a little bit. Twilight. Actually, twilight's the time when the stars start to come out and you get the horizon at the same time. Because what you need for navigation is the horizon and the stars at the same time, so that you can get a very accurate angle between the two. I mean, old Captain Cook sailing up the inside of the Barrier Reef, he sailed up there with no charts, in a wooden small vessel, a sailing ship, and he only went aground once. Amazing, amazing navigation. It all hinges around the fact that your charts are right. I wouldn't trust them. I'd say the old skipper's got a pretty good idea of what's going on, because he's been sailing around here for so long that he knows where the reefs and things are. But when we're around the islands, he does it more by eye and instinct. These charts, so it's all tucked up underneath here, but most of these charts, in fact, are based on information that was gathered
maybe 200, 150 years ago. And a lot of the positions of these more remote islands haven't been replotted since then. There are updates all the time, of course, you know, where there are shipping channels and so on. But some of them can be a mile or so out of position. You're in trouble. You're in trouble if the island, you know where you are, but if the island doesn't know where it's supposed to be.
From Siao we sail on to the last and largest island in the chain, Sangihe Island. Early the next morning, Sangihe rises before us. Here, Mount Awu erupted in 1966, taking 7,000 lives. We are looking for an underwater volcanic vent and could smell sulfur in the air.
Ini yang garis ini lingkaran sebelah barat dari Mahengetan.
Judging by the chart, I would say that that's the best bet over there so far.
Then there, 200 meters off to starboard, rollers breaking in the midst of the ocean. The currents are strong here, so the crew keep a good lookout. Over a ridge, I enter an incredible coral garden. Indonesians worship volcanoes as gods, the creators and destroyers of life. These reefs are the epicenter of coral life on Earth. There are probably more marine species on this one reef than the whole of the Caribbean. But they are fragile. We've lost over a quarter of the reefs around the world in just a few years. These incredible ecosystems could be gone in just another 50 years.
I've lost my power of speech. On the venting volcano, shallow, about 4 meters, dramatic drop off, and then just towers coming out of the bottom with the most dramatic coral you can ever imagine. It's fantastic, beautiful, untouched. This was worth the trip.
From Sangihe Island, we turn east and sail 400 miles across the open water to Morotai and Halmahera.
The news from East Timor is increasingly grim.
Ever since I have been at sea, I have listened to shortwave radio. That sound that circles the earth is strange and reassuring. Sometimes the news is disturbing.
The thousands of refugees sheltering there were taken away in trucks to an unknown destination. It
appears to be part of a well-coordinated operation to move large...
In Ambon, the next island south, Christians and Muslims are killing each other, and in East Timor, the ongoing political crisis continues to boil.
Did a little bit better than expected last night. Probably making good over 5.5 knots. Take a few hours off our ETA.
Finally, after several days and nights at sea, we approached Morotai. On September 14th, 1944, American soldiers came ashore. In the battle for the island, 325 Japanese and 45 Americans were killed.
All of this is fairly shallow over here on the port bow. I can understand why the Americans had problems going ashore here, battling through this stuff. Wouldn't be able to get a boat in or a ship in very close. But it's very pretty.
As the Allies secured the island, Japanese soldiers hid out in the mountains. In 1959, 9 soldiers walked out from the forest to surrender. And in 1974, 30 years after the war had finished, they were followed out by a Japanese sergeant. When the American forces were here, this quayside would have been buzzing. Not much happening now, though. We need to get our travel permits sorted with the local police and investigate the diving possibilities.
This is Daruba, the largest town here in Morotai. And by sheer coincidence, or good planning rather, we've arrived here 55 years to the day that that the Americans arrived here to take the control of the southern part of the island as part of their leapfrogging the islands up the Pacific to get to the Philippines from the Japanese. And everywhere you look here, there's evidence of their landings. Look at this. Here, this is just a piece of a fence. This stuff is used when the vehicles go ashore. They just lay down on the beach, bang, and they can drive off the landing craft. There are fences all over the place that look like this. There's another one just here.
At the police station, we are informed that Australians are not permitted to come ashore. It seems that Australian soldiers, my own countrymen, were heading a UN peacekeeping force to East Timor, and Aussies are not welcome. Today, my passport stowed safely away, I become a Frenchman. At the quayside, our boat seems to be attracting an unusual amount of interest. The local island chief, the uccan tour, comes alongside. For the hire of his speedboat, he will guide us to some wreck sites. He first leads us out to a nearby island. This was once General MacArthur's headquarters. Now the island is only home to an old fisherman and his wife. He said he came here 48 years ago, not long after MacArthur and his troops left. He offers to take us to what he thinks was MacArthur's airstrip.
This flat area that we're on here, running north and south, I guess, is just explained as a runway for MacArthur's Air Force. That's what it was explained at. But certainly it's flat enough and it's long enough, although the width is not very great. It's a Ford's track wagon, according to the plate here. Athe Truss Wheel Company, Chicago, USA.
Two very solid pieces of kit. Typical, isn't it? The thing that survives in the best condition is the nameplate of the manufacturer.
The Hook'em tour takes us out to a small fishing boat. There is a compressor on board and they are diving for sea cucumbers. They had just recovered a load of small arms ammunition from the seafloor. It is live and possibly dangerous. Dropping them like this makes the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. But it might be a clue to what is down there. Perhaps a warplane or a small craft like an American PT boat. For over an hour we searched back and forth along a steep shelf where the divers had told us they found the ammunition, about 20 meters down. Nothing. Above, the weather is turning. The wind has picked up and the surface is getting choppier.
Oke ini, 10 meter nggak sampai.
The crew are getting worried. Reluctantly, I come to the surface and we have to call it a day.
We found the ledge and swam along it, but the current was going sort of 90 degrees to it, so it was a bit difficult. But we had a good search around, but we couldn't find it.
That night, the islanders are holding a traditional war dance. There is a blackout, and the only light on the island is at the power station. One of the percussion instruments is a 6-inch shell casing, probably from a ship-mounted gun. Strange to think that during the war this island was inundated with Allied soldiers. Since then, foreigners have become a rare sight. It was a great night, but in the back of my mind I know that our diving time is running out. The monsoon season is approaching fast, and we have several days of sailing across open water to get back to Manado. We would have to make a move. That night we got interesting news of the discovery of a new wreck site by a local diver. We turned west, back towards Sulawesi. This is a very nice looking harbour. There's all sorts of wrecks already along the coastline, but that's not what we're looking for. I suspect that those are probably just local vessels that have been pushed up on the beach. That's normally what happens around here. The one that we're looking for is here. 125.13.5. X marks the spot. After a day and 2 nights sailing, we anchor off Bangka Island just before daybreak. We have time for 1 more day's diving. This is probably our last chance. We meet up with Tino, the local diver who had found the wreckage of what he thought could be a World War II aircraft.
When I found this plane wreck, I never recognized this is a plane, because until I found this and until I recognized this propeller.
The propeller.
That make me sure that this is the plane.
Ah, yes.
This is a plane.
Yeah.
Here's the top view.
Yeah.
This is the island. Here is the locations of the wreck, where there our reference is these pearl farms, lots of pearl farms.
Oh, pearl farms, yeah. Okay. And the visibility?
Visibility about 10 to 15 meters there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's quite good visibility, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
He had mapped out the site, but hadn't fully explored the wreckage. This was wise. If there are explosives down there, they would in all likelihood be still armed, corroded by salt water, and extremely volatile. Earlier, some of the islanders had told us that in early 1945 an American warplane attacked a Japanese patrol boat off the coast. The boat fired back, downing the American plane. This could be it.
Itu Tino mau turun dulu. Ya. Mau turun dulu. Bagaimana?
Ke sini Jo, di samping Jo. Ke depan.
Flashlight.
Flashlight.
Tino led us down. He said the wreckage lay at a depth of 25 meters. We had less than 25 minutes dive time. Again, we would follow precautions for diving on a military site. Locate, observe, but do not touch. First we uncovered what appeared to be an oil filter. We must be close. Ahead, I could see a dark shape emerging on the seabed. Something was there. As we get closer, it begins to take form. It is definitely an aircraft, a large one, possibly an American bomber.
This is the tail section of the wing here. This is amazing.
It is these moments which I absolutely love. The heart rate quickens, but the excitement is mixed with a feeling of reverence. Men died in this aircraft. Later, we would find out more about the bomber. The islanders told us that soon after the plane crashed, the bodies of 2 American airmen were washed up on the nearby beach. The day their bodies were found, a young woman on the island gave birth. She named her child Lexi Leo, after the name on one of the dead airmen's dog tags. Whether other airmen survived the crash is not known. It was a huge aircraft, very, very big. The first piece we saw, lying flat with the point. When you look at it from above, the point like that, I'm sure that is the rudder from the aeroplane. Where you have the 2 propellers in the ground. I think the wing is there, 1 engine, and then the 2 propellers like that. Yes! Good one. After returning to Manado, we did some more checking. The story of the wreck is still a mystery. American military officials have no record of Alexei Leo missing in action. But his legacy, along with the rest of the crew, is all too real. It lies, undisturbed, at the bottom of the Moluccan Sea. I love these islands and these people, and it would take a lifetime to explore it all. But I've got a few years left in me yet, and I think I'll spend some of them here.